it's never a straight path, is it, as a yoga teacher? There's never like one direction you follow. But it's been a really amazing journey over the last 11 years.
Welcome back to Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast. My name is Reika and I am your host. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the Full-Time Yoga Podcast this week. I hope you've been enjoying the 3-part series of Yoga Cues Debunked conversations that Karen and I had. I've been getting a lot of great feedback and questions from those conversations. So I'm happy to hear you all are enjoying more of those short form but educational content. And if you're new to my podcast, Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast, I want to say welcome. I'm so happy you found your way here. So I started this podcast about a year ago to interview full-time yoga teachers from across the world to hear about their journey and how they got to where they are at in their yoga teaching career. And selfishly, I wanted to learn more about how other full-time yoga teachers are making it work and making a living and doing what they love, what kind of creativity they use in their teaching career to make it a sustainable career, to be a yoga teacher. Because it's not easy to be a full-time yoga teacher. In my opinion, for myself, I feel like I have to have so many different income streams and gotta get creative on how to put myself out there and earn money, but then also stay true to yoga and stay true to what I believe in or what I feel like I am in alignment with. And this journey of this podcast has been amazing because I get to speak to other full-time yoga teachers and ask them so many questions about their career path. And that's been really fun for me. I hope you're enjoying these episodes that I come out with every week. I do have 2 announcements to make before I introduce today's interview. First announcement is about the workshop that's happening this upcoming Saturday, April 9th, from Saturday 2 to 3:30 p.m. Pacific time. And this workshop is for yoga teachers, and Hannah Lee is going to be teaching this workshop. She is a licensed social worker and she teaches trauma-informed yoga. She has such a beautiful and unique experience to share, as well as any yoga teachers listening. If you want to learn more about how to make your yoga class more trauma-informed, or kind of dive deep into what is trauma-informed and how can I make my class more accessible, and what kind of impact the language you choose to use may be having in your classroom. So I'm extremely excited for this workshop that's coming up. I'll put the link on the show notes to learn more about this workshop, as well as if you want to sign up. The workshop is on Zoom, so you can join from anywhere in the world. Also, the workshop will be recorded, so if you sign up and you cannot make it, you will receive the access to the recording of the workshop. So that's this Saturday, April 9th, 2 to 3:30 p.m. Pacific time. One more announcement I have is about my upcoming yoga retreat in Nicaragua. From July 12th through the 19th, I am leading a week-long ethical yoga retreat in Nicaragua called Align with Purpose. And this retreat has been on the work for quite some time. I felt like in the yoga retreat space, I did not see many retreat that focused on how to leave a positive impact in the places that yoga retreat go visit. How do we foster a relationship with the local communities? How can we learn from the local communities, and how can we also give back to the local communities? So that is a huge part of this retreat that I organize in Nicaragua. We will be volunteering for the 2 different organizations, local NGOs on site, and part of the money that participants pay to join the retreat will go directly to the nonprofit organization that we will be partnering with. On top of that, there'll be yoga classes every day in the morning and more of a gentle yin or restorative class in the evening. It's going to be in this beautiful, secluded, off the beaten path, northern Nicaragua beaches that it's magical. This place is magical. The sunset that you are going to be able to see every single day while you're there, it's just magical. So I'm just excited to take a group there. I'm excited to spend a week with the participants in Nicaragua and learn about the local culture, give back to the local culture, and also cultivate relationship with the local culture. So if that's something you're interested in, let me know, because I have one room that opened up for this retreat. This room can be double or single occupancy. So you can have the room to yourself, or you can share the room with your friend, best friend, family members, your partner, whoever you choose. And there are either 1 or 2 beds in the room depending on who signs up. And the prices will be different depending on if it's a single occupancy or double occupancy. So if you're interested in this retreat, please let me know. I would love, love, love to have you join this retreat. I'll put the link to the retreat landing page on my website. So if you're interested in signing up, or if you have any questions, I put a lot of information on my landing page. So you will find most of your answers to your questions. But if there's any specific questions you want to ask me, you can always reach out to me and ask me. Via Instagram is probably where I'm most active, but you can also write me a message through my website as well. So everything you need to know will be in the show notes. All right, enough housekeeping for now. Let's talk about the conversation I had with Andrew. So I have an incredible guest whose journey truly embodies the spirit of yoga as a lifelong adventure. My guest this week is Andrew Singer. He is ERYT 500 yoga teacher, the founder of the Flying Tree Yoga in Medellín, Colombia, and dedicated teacher trainer specializing in alignment-based flow. He is originally from London, but he spent a decade teaching languages around the world before deciding to fully immerse himself in yoga. His yoga teaching journey started in Thailand, and eventually he ended up in Colombia. In this episode, we talk about Andrew's experience building yoga studio in Medellín, the evolution of yoga in South America, and how he navigated the challenging times during the pandemic as a business owner. We also dive into his vision for making yoga education more accessible in Spanish-speaking communities. I'm so excited to share this conversation with you because Andrew's journey is a powerful reminder that yoga is about more than just movement. It's about connection, adaptability, and finding joy in the unexpected. I hope you enjoy the conversation I had with Andrew, and I will speak to you on the other side. Welcome, Andrew, for coming on to Full-Time Yoga Teacher podcast. I'm very excited that I get to have this conversation with you. So please tell the listener, where are you joining us from? And also, where are you originally from?
Yeah, the accent's different from my current location for sure. So I'm calling you from Medellín, Colombia, which is a beautiful city. It's around about 1,500 meters above sea level, very green, very tropical, known as the city of eternal spring. And I've been here for around about 10 years, but I was born obviously in London, England. So yeah, there's the difference in accent.
Yeah. Well, I have a lot of questions I want to ask you of how you ended up in Colombia. Traveled 9 months, backpacked from Peru all the way back to California back in 2013. And Colombia and Mexico was my 2 favorite countries of all the places I visited. So I love Colombia. I ended up falling in love with Cali, and I just loved dancing there. It was such a great time.
Oh, wow. Yeah, Cali salsa is really something else, man. That's some fancy footwork right there.
Yeah, it's a different, the salsa there is different than anywhere in the world, but the energy of the people in Cali, but just Colombia as a whole, people are so kind,
so welcoming, and they were just also very funny. Like they're always making jokes, and I just have so many great memories of meeting amazing people in Colombia.
Yeah, and as someone from London, I always have this memory of when I used to live back in London that I was sat on a public bus and somebody talked to me and I was just like, who is this person? What do they want from me? Like, and it was just a guy who I was having a good day and he wanted to chat, but I was like, just so uncomfortable with it. And, comparing that to how people are here, everybody wants to have a chat and people are very genuine and just very genuinely polite and nice. So yeah, I'm a big fan of like just the social culture that you find around in Colombian cities for sure.
Yeah. Did you become a yoga teacher in London and then move to Colombia, or did you become yoga teacher somewhere else in the world?
Funnily enough, I've never taught yoga in my own country, if you can believe that. In fact, I haven't lived in the UK for about the last 15 years now, so that's a whole other story. But no, I got my first teacher training out in Southeast Asia, and I did I actually did my first internship out there in Bali Silent Retreat, which was just this amazing opportunity to test the waters and see if I wanted to teach yoga more kind of full time or not. And just being able to have that month to do it really helped me answer that question and settle in and think, yeah, actually, I'm really loving this. I'm really enjoying it. So at that point, that was when I decided to travel across to Latin America to see what came next.
And so your teacher training was in Bali?
It was in Thailand, actually. Yeah, outside Chiang.
Thailand.
So
Okay.
yeah, beautiful, beautiful place. I did some Thai massage training as well, which was actually really, really helpful for my first few years as a yoga teacher. I think that many people kind of have this idea that they can maybe do a teacher training and just jump straight time into full-time teaching and like somehow kind of, make a full living as a yoga teacher that way. But I think a lot of people meet a bit of a nasty shock if they kind of have that impression. It's quite difficult, I think, as somebody who's freshly qualified to find enough teaching gigs and so on to be able to make a living. So having that kind of complementary skill with Thai massage really helped me, I guess, pay the bills and something that was very complementary while I sort of found my way into being more of a full-time yoga teacher.
And were you doing before you took teacher training? Did you have another career before, or were you like right after college? What were you doing before?
So yeah, I've been mainly working with languages my whole sort of adult life. So I worked with four languages: ancient Greek, believe it or not, Latin, English, and Spanish. And that's kind of what brought me out of the UK originally. After I graduated from university, I was really lucky to be offered a position in a liberal arts college in Vermont in the United States.
Oh,
So
cool.
I spent like a couple of years just really getting outside of my own little bubble there and I think that's kind of what really opened my eyes to how exciting it can be to live in other parts of the world and kind of, go on these multi-year adventures and work along the way. And so once I finished up my position in the university, I didn't really want to kind of go back to my bubble in the UK, and I wanted to continue traveling. So um, at that point, I went to Madrid in Spain for 3 years. I got much more kind of into my yoga practice at the time there in Madrid. There's a lot of yoga in Spain, as I'm sure you're well aware of. And yeah, I mean that's where I got to learn Spanish as well. So I met a huge number of the amazing people from Venezuela and Colombia as well. And it was actually thanks to their advice that I ended up out here in Medellin.
Okay. And what was it that made you think that I want to become a yoga teacher? Is there any
Yeah.
specific moment or like someone who influenced you or anything that made you realize that you want to take a teacher training?
I mean, I think ever since I was a kid, I knew that I wanted to teach. Teaching has always been a passion of mine. I just really enjoy the human connection that you make through teaching. So I guess that's why, I originally had moved into languages teaching. And I think that there's just a certain point along that road where you're teaching one thing, but you have this other passion that you really, really enjoy. And I think it's very natural at that point to say, well, I want to teach this as well. Yeah. At some point during my time in Spain, I decided that, yeah, this is a crazy thing to do. I phoned up my parents thinking they were going to tell me, what are you thinking? It's such a terrible idea. But no, they were really encouraging and they said, yeah, you should go for it. And so I took that leap and I mean, it's never a straight path, is it, as a yoga teacher? There's never like one direction you follow. But it's been a really amazing journey over the last sort of well, how long now? 2014 to now, 11 years. Yeah, 11 years.
Mhm. 2014 was your
Was
first
my
teacher
first
training
YTT.
in Thailand. Okay. So it seems like you always had interest in traveling, like you were already interested in languages and how to speak multiple languages, went to Vermont and then Spain and then teacher training in Thailand. So you did you travel a lot growing up?
Yeah, I did. I was really lucky to be in this sort of European network of schools. So
Mhm.
we all had kind of relationships with the other schools in different countries in Europe. So Poland, Austria, Finland, France, Germany, just to name a few. And so there were constantly these opportunities to go and live with families in these other countries and spend a few weeks, just really kind of, we went to school with the kids there as well. And that was really crazy. Like when I was 11, I went to school in Finland for a little while. And um, it just really, I don't know, kind of showed me how exciting it can be to kind of feel these other cultures.
Mhm.
Yeah, really, really love that aspect.
Yeah, I love that. So you took your 200-hour teacher training in Thailand, and that also involved Thai massage training. Uh, and I'm guessing back then, 2014, yoga trade wasn't a thing, or if it was, it wasn't very well known. Like I think people, this what is it? This idea of yoga teachers traveling, quote unquote, traveling yoga teachers, maybe weren't as common as it is now. So I'm sure you were kind of like, you were doing something that not everybody even knew that it was possible back then. So how did that happen for you?
Yeah, I mean, I joined Yoga Trade really like about a year after I think they were founded. So I've been with them since the very beginning, and I absolutely love what they've done with the website, and I love how they've grown their community and just all of the opportunities that they facilitate around the world. I think it's such a valuable project.
Hmm.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like back then, it wasn't a question of kind of applying to jobs through these kind of nicely made platforms and so on. I just kind of booked a plane ticket and arrived here in Medellin, and
Hmm.
um, I guess just sort of started making connections on the ground. I started collaborating with different projects and different studios around the city.
Hmm.
Yoga back in 2015 was not a thing here in Medellin either. I mean, nobody like Colombian was really practicing. It was, a few practitioners in a couple of areas. Um, but as well, I've been very kind of privileged to be here during the explosion of yoga that's taken place over the last 10 years in Latin
Hmm.
America, and just the level of interest that you see in yoga and other sort of related practices now is enormous.
Yeah. I actually would love to hear more about that. But before that, what made you decide that after teacher training, Colombia, Medellin was where you wanted to move to?
Yeah, so I think I've always had a kind of a streak in me as well that once wanted to organize projects, like, kind of run my own thing, maybe even get like a small business off the ground. I didn't really know. But what
Mhm,
I did know is that, Spain wasn't a very promising place for that. Um, I mean, apart from the fact that the yoga market was quite saturated already,
mhm,
it was also, just after the economic crash in 2008, 9, 10, that was still kind of effects were being felt in Spain. So I just really wanted to go somewhere where maybe yoga wasn't such a well recognized thing and get it on the
mhm,
ground, I suppose. And that's exactly what I did. So yeah, Medellin was a
mhm.
great choice. I just booked a one way ticket out here. I remember taking a taxi down through the mountains and just feeling like, oh my God, I know literally nobody in this city. And here I am. But, 10 years later, I'm married. I have a baby boy. I have a beautiful community of friends. And it's been a really gratifying, not easy, but like a really gratifying journey.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit more of what happened when you first arrived to Medellin, like what string of things led you to become a studio owner and kind of be here at the right time of the boom of yoga there, but you said it wasn't a big thing at all when you were there in the beginning. So yeah, I would love to know that journey.
Yeah, so I think when I arrived, I was very lucky to meet a local lady called, well, not local lady, American lady who was living locally, called
Mhm,
Sierra. And she was starting the Flying Tree project just from her front room, basically. So I
mhm,
started collaborating a lot with her. I started helping her to get some of the elements of Flying Tree off the ground, and that was sort of in 2015 and early 2016. She had
mhm,
a baby girl, and she decided that she wanted to dedicate herself to other things. And so she told me the name and sort of handed the project over to me. So I've been a sort of a studio owner, I guess, since 2016 onwards, and was able
Mm.
to make, just a huge number of mistakes that you kind of need to make, I think, as a business owner, to figure out how to do things. But kind of being here, I guess, earlier kind of allowed me that time to just kind of really figure out what I was doing before, we get to the point where we are now, where there are a lot of more sort of competing studios and communities. And
So you bought the business from a woman who was moving on to do something else. So it was like already established yoga studio.
no, I wouldn't say that. It was just yoga classes from her front room at the time.
Okay.
So it was very much like a kind of a budding little yoga community.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, it's become like a really, well, I mean, it's become one of the biggest studios in Medellin over the last few years. So that's been,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's been a long journey and just a process of really building up all of these relationships with local teachers and forming this really, really awesome teaching team and beginning to kind of grow the practice of yoga as well among local people who before
Mhm.
maybe were kind of uncomfortable with the idea of yoga. It's very Catholic out here. So, not
Mhm.
really sure what yoga meant, if it was something that was
Yeah.
maybe against their religion and so on. But I think people have become much, much more comfortable with what yoga kind of represents and how it can be practiced and so on.
Mm.
So yeah.
So when you took over that owner or business
Mhm.
2 years after your teacher training, so you were still a pretty new teacher.
Uh,
That's amazing. You just took it on and started building community. I guess I'm curious, like in the beginning, how was it? Were you still kind of teaching out of somebody's front yard and it started to like earn enough money to buy a space or rent a space? And how did you start hiring teachers? And what was your schedule like in the beginning versus like how many classes you have now on the
Yeah, it's
schedule?
interesting. I was just looking back at yesterday. I found a folder in my computer with like all the old schedules in, and it's just amazing to look back and it's like, wow, um, how much things have changed since then. So yeah, I mean, luckily back in 2015, 2016, prices were extremely cheap here in Medellin, not so much anymore,
Mhm.
unfortunately. So we
Yeah.
were able to rent a building for for our yoga studio, and we're still in that same place today. It's probably like double now what it used to, but I mean, it's a perfect space. It's got this really nice big front kind of practice area, and then it's got some rooms at the back for people who come to join us from abroad to do teacher trainings and internship programs and language courses.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, just my God, the first couple of years were really just a lot of trial and error. I tried to do everything myself. Like I laid the floor in the studio myself, and that was a complete disaster. And what I didn't realize is that, you take dry wood into a humid tropical climate, it expands, right? So the whole floor began to kind of warp and bubble and have all of these like lumps and stuff in it. And so I was like, oh my God, okay, I've got to take the whole thing up again and recut it. Except this time I recut it too small.
Mhm.
And so all of the planks would like slide against one another. So people would be in like in down dog and like their down dog would suddenly become like a couple of inches longer. So, yeah, I mean, I definitely learned to like employ professionals to do certain things. And I mean, yeah, I was doing everything from like the social media to like maintenance of the building to teaching classes to designing programs. And I mean, how do you build a community? You just you meet local people who share a vision with you, and little by little, if people believe in that vision, other people are kind of attracted to that process as well. Just through the years, I guess I began to meet all of these really key members of my team who really believe in Flying Tree as, it's not just sort of bricks and a pretty painted wall. It's really a group of people who sort of come together with a shared vision of celebrating their life through their yoga practice.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, that's where we are now. I mean, I think that we do a lot of work to host different community style events, free karma yoga events, sound healings, open days, just so many different initiatives to kind of get people interested in the community. And
Mhm.
then that of course, is rewarded by having people who become these consistent members as well.
Yeah. Couple follow-up questions. Number one is Medellin now is very popular. I feel like it's like where everybody want to go if you're like digital nomad. If you work online, it's like Medellin's a place to be. People want to live there, move there. So that's something I see and hear a lot. Beautiful city. People, a lot of Americans, maybe Europeans love, Canadians probably too, really enjoy living there. So like you said, that probably, I'm assuming that and everything else has risen the cost of living and maybe rent and all of that quite much higher than it was before. So I'm curious, your student base, do you have half and half of like Colombians versus foreigners who come? Or is it mostly Colombians? And do you offer classes in English and Spanish? Or is it classes are done in both languages? Or I'm curious about that.
Both teaching a bilingual class is a lot of work, man. I mean, think about queuing in two languages simultaneously. So no, we tried that in the beginning, but we do have classes in both languages. I mean, I think about maybe 75% of our practitioners are Colombians, and about 25% are foreigners. So yeah, we have a mixture, and I think that's something that's really beautiful is to be able to bring people from these very different cultures, backgrounds, and communities, and everybody shares this same kind of vision of having a space to kind of come together and really enjoy life through yoga practice. So I think that you know uh, that's what really kind of binds these very different kind of communities of people together. But for sure, I mean, Medellin has changed radically over the last 10 years, and just all of these different projects and initiatives that come and go. And of course, COVID kind of came in the middle of it all and really changed things around. I think we were much more reliant on foreigners before COVID happened, and because tourism just stopped basically for a year and a half, 2 years, we had to do this kind of really radical shift towards working with the local community a lot more. And now I think we've got a nice balance between the two.
That's so interesting to hear that before the pandemic, there was more reliant on tourism, the money coming in from tourism, but now it kind of has changed and shifted. So that kind of brings me to the question of pandemic. How did the pandemic affect your business? And what was it like before the pandemic? And then what are some changes and transition you had to go through during? And how has it shifted now that it's a post-pandemic era?
So I could really feel pre-pandemic, like 2019, just how much more Colombians were interested in practicing and learning. We did like a huge number of like just beginners classes back in the day. Um, and so we were definitely beginning to kind of move a little bit in that direction. Obviously, when COVID came, I mean, we were like closed for 6 full months. I mean, of not having a single person come through the front door. So that was
Yeah.
really hard. And it was just trying to kind of get by through online offerings, online courses. I did a lot of work with teaching people how to teach yoga in Spanish during the pandemic. So we ran a lot of language courses online, which is really nice, just a way to kind of connect with the international community. And when things opened back up again, it was really it was a slow process. It was at least like 2.5 years to kind of recuperate the same kind of rhythm that we were seeing beforehand. But we really did kind of move much more in the direction of working with Colombians who really advanced in their practice, and they began to want teacher training. So we translated all of our, 200-hour teacher training stuff into Spanish and began to offer that as a course as well. Now we're doing the same with our 300-hour teacher training, and that's all going to be translated across to Spanish now. So it's really nice because you see people grow, you see people want to try more challenging things, you see people interested in becoming teachers, and we've even hired into our community people who've graduated from our teacher trainings now as well. So 4 of our sort of 10 teachers are graduates of our own teacher training, which is really, really
Mhm. So you said the 200 and 300 that you initially offered was only in English. So were you only targeting people who were maybe wanting to do kind of destination teacher training in Colombia?
nice.
And then
Exactly.
that now switched to now you're teaching it in Spanish to the local people who live in Colombia and
As well.
Medellin.
So we do both 200 hours in English and in Spanish, 300 hours in English, and now we're going to be offering the advanced training in Spanish as well. So it's, yeah, a lot of
That's
work.
amazing. How long have you been running that 200, both English and I guess the first one was English, so English and the Spanish one? And how often do you run it? Where are you promoting it to get these? English people who's looking for this destination teacher
Right.
training?
So the English course, we started it in 2019, I think it was.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it's been running for what, 6 years now, I guess.
Yeah,
Um,
right before the pandemic.
yeah, but we had like a really strong year, 2019. We had three different YTT groups coming in English. And so we really got our um, sort of feet on the ground there and the experience that we needed. And then we switched to teaching it online during the pandemic, which was, yeah,
Mm.
it worked as well. Um, so yeah, we offer three 200-hour courses a year at the moment, as well as one 300-hour course a year and four internship programs. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and we advertise, obviously in different places. We have our own dedicated websites, flyingtreeyoga.com and yogainternships.com. So quite a lot of people find us through that. Through word of mouth as well. I think once you've worked with a certain number of people, they go recommending it to their friends. They talk about um, the great experience that they've had, and people get really inspired to come out here and join us as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, the booking websites are obviously becoming an important thing as well. So book
Mhm.
yoga retreats, book teacher trainings,
Yeah.
and all of those other booking.com sort of sites. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, okay, so how long is the teacher training? I guess I'm curious about both of them. The one that's in English that's kind of more geared towards destination, people traveling to take teacher training. How long are those? And how long are the Spanish one that's more catered towards people who live there?
Right. Yes, they're very different, as you rightly assumed. The English one is a month-long intensive, so 4 weeks. It's really nice, bring people together from all over the world. I mean, from Australia and New Zealand through Europe, through the United States and Canada. So yeah, those are quite often residential. People want to have their accommodation, they live on site, and it's just this really beautiful intensive month where we all move towards teaching a day of free classes to the local population. We have translators come in, and it's just this really, really beautiful space that we create at the end of our teacher training programs.
Yeah.
In terms of the local teacher training, that's 4 and a bit months long. So that takes place at like evening, nighttime.
Hmm.
3 times a week. And then we have like certain Saturdays that we get together and have a full day as well. And so those are really nice because you have like a bit longer to really build up these friendships and relationships with local students. And yeah, they stay in the community afterwards as well. So you see them, again and again, which is just, it's really beautiful to feel like you're kind of growing a family.
Yeah. Well, I have so many questions from that. But one question is, I love that it's 4 months, even the destination one. I actually worked in Peru last year for 4 months. I got hired for a teacher training school in Peru, and it was 2 weeks. And they were supposedly, they had an online portion that they were supposed to complete, and then they come in person for 2 weeks in Peru for like destination. And it was all day long for 2 weeks straight. But I just think it's not enough. So I like that yours is 4 weeks intensive, even for people who are traveling from abroad. And you said you provide accommodation for them. Is there on site, like, is there a place
Yeah,
they
that's right.
stay, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, there's two options. Some people like to live on site. They like to, have everything kind of there, be able to get out of bed and straight to the practice space. Other people choose to, find their own, local accommodation, like in an Airbnb or whatever. But yeah, I think I don't have no idea how you could do 200 hours in a meaningful way in 2 weeks. Honestly, I think that so much of the value that comes from a teacher training experience is the time that you're able to spend with others learning as well and establishing these really beautiful friendships and bonds that, often last a lifetime afterwards, right? So
Mhm.
um, we do have our 4 week program, and we also offer people the opportunity to stay on for another 4 weeks after they finish their teacher training and do an internships program with us, which means that they get to teach as part of our teaching team. They get supported by experienced yoga professionals. They get constructive and kind feedback, and they really get to kind of figure out, after this crazy period of kind of lots of input, lots of new information, like, okay, now it's time to process that. Okay, I've heard what my teacher thinks about what yoga means and how to sequence a class, but what does it mean to me? Like, who am I as a teacher? What do I want to teach? What resonates with me? What messages do I want to share? How do I want to design a class? And so, by offering this internship space, we also give people time to really kind of find their sense of self confidence and their own voice as a yoga teacher.
I love that. I love how you create a program that kind of feeds into each other. It's like you create something and there's this ecosystem you created that they can continue to be part of it and feed into it. And I want to ask more about the internship soon, but I'm curious about that must be a lot of like, I feel like as a business owner and somebody who's in charge of this teacher training in studio, it's a lot that you're handling with teacher training programs, both in English and the Spanish one, that it's different format in terms of the length. And like you also provide accommodation for people who choose to stay on site. So is that like apartment that you rent out that you rent it out to people who come for teacher training?
Part of the same space. Yeah. So
Okay.
in Medellin, there are these really, really big houses that they have in the
Mhm.
in different neighborhoods in the city. So in our
Mhm.
house, we had the front part is the sort of the public facing yoga studio, and the back
Mhm.
is the accommodation with, kitchen and social space and bedrooms and all of that. So yeah, it kind of all
Okay.
fit together quite nicely.
Yeah. And is that only where or is that the place the students teacher training students live, or is somebody else live there permanently as well?
No, well, I mean, I have an assistant, so we've been doing volunteer work exchanges for many, many years through Yoga Trade as well. So I have
Mhm.
people who want to come and join our community and help us grow, and also, participate for free in all of our different training programs, generally
Mhm.
for 3 months at a time,
Mhm.
sometimes for more if if they really like it. Sometimes they stay for up to 6 months.
Mhm.
So my assistant is normally living in the space, but apart from that, it's just the other people in our training programs, basically.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, a baby boy, so I definitely am not living in the space. I don't think people would like to have toy cars shoved in their mouths at 6 a.m. It tends to happen in my household right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have my own space.
Okay, so another question that came to me was now that you have experience teaching teacher training in English, that's more intensive 1 month for people who come for destination from Europe, Australia, New Zealand, United States, and now you also teach one for the local community in Colombia. What are some differences you found in maybe the students, their expectations, or their maybe attitude towards the training, or maybe even like different questions they might ask that like, one group tends to ask these kind of questions and curious about this, and other group have this kind of question because I'm sure there's some different big differences in maybe how they're thinking or approaching or questions they come up with in the training.
It's very curious, and I talk about this a lot with my other colleague she's Colombian, but she also lived for many, many years in the United States, so she knows both cultures intimately. And we often find that sometimes foreigners can be quite reserved when talking about spirituality. I know from
Mhm.
my own case, my own background, being British was very reserved, and sort of talking about something that's kind of so personal to me. I don't know if I feel comfortable about doing that in a public space. Whereas Colombians just love it. Like they really love to kind of get to grips with all of these different kind of spiritual aspects. And they're extremely open, extremely willing to share about things that, we might kind of consider kind of a bit kind of private, really, isn't it? To talk about that with this group of strangers.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I guess that's kind of one of the main differences that I would see. Other than that, it's just a joy. I don't know. I love working with these different groups of people, and every group is completely distinct. You get some groups who are like so high energy, and kind of you got other groups who are much more kind of intellectual and serious. And it's just like that being a teacher trainer. You just kind of roll with
Yeah.
the different personalities who join.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I bet. Another question that came to you when you're saying that was spirituality. You said Colombians were much more open to enjoy talking about the spirituality aspect. And at the beginning of our conversation, you said in the beginning, teaching yoga in Colombia was a little bit challenging because some people thought we're maybe is this another religion and like this is against the Catholic or Christianity. So maybe some people felt hesitant to practice or get to know yoga. So how does that show up maybe back then, but even still now when you're teaching yoga and also this philosophy and spirituality of yoga?
Sure. I mean, occasionally I get a question about it nowadays, but I guess in a way, a lot of the people who are practicing are the younger kind of generation, right?
Mm.
So people who are in their 20s and early 30s are kind of very much, I guess, the kind of the age bracket that we're working with when it comes to yoga students. And I think younger
Mhm.
generations just tend to be a little bit more open-minded. I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble
Yeah.
for saying that. Again, for some of my millennial peers will sort of come and start
Mhm.
defending. But no, I mean, I think that very much the people who are sort of concerned about sort of conflicts of religion and so on are perhaps the older generations. But, I think as people begin to discover that, yoga is a spiritual practice that is not necessarily bound to Hinduism. I mean, it can be if you want it to be, it's not like that for everybody. Then, yeah, for sure. I think that there's just a lot more willingness to accept it and to try and to enjoy the fact that it could often be a very complementary practice, no matter what your kind of religious leanings are.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And how do you manage? This is what I find interesting and also like fun and exciting at the same time when leading a teacher training, and you've been leading it for so long across different cultures. So I feel like you have a really good maybe experience or tip to share on this podcast. But how do you manage groups when like you want to encourage this community and you want to encourage this space of like safety that people feel safe sharing and in themselves, but then still be you as a teacher or as a leader, a facilitator of the group, sometimes you do have to kind of like be strict, I guess, in a way that like you don't want the conversation to just keep going on off tangent. You have to kind of rein everything back in, or you sometimes have to be strict about certain behavior. So how do you balance the two as a
Yeah, I mean,
teacher?
when I was younger, I used to work with teenagers, and I think that kind of prepares you for absolutely everything. And I'd often be working with teenagers from multiple different cultures, like from Italy, from Spain, from Greece, and all over Europe, and all together often in the same room at the same time. So yeah, kind of eh, figuring out how to sort of control the space is something I really had to learn back then. Because um, teenagers love to act out, of course, and you need to kind of keep the class on its rails. So for sure, I
Mhm,
mean, I think that's a part of it. Really just kind of teaching with a sense of sincerity and respect, I think, for
mhm,
what you're teaching, and
mhm,
very much setting the tone and the boundaries of the conversation with the way in which you practice and you lead and you guide. I think that at the end of the day,
mhm,
that really helps. I was also very lucky that my colleague Andrea, were like sort of yin and yang in terms of our energies in many ways and in a very
mhm,
complementary way. And so it's always nice to have a colleague there who can help handle situations as well. We do sort of really prioritize providing support to our trainees in a one-to-one basis. It's
mhm,
something that we've really, really understood over the last few years that it's really important, when people are going through these times, profound personal change. Often people are joining teacher trainings because they've left their job or they've left a relationship or they want a new direction in their lives or whatever. And so if people are coming into this space, they're dealing with sort of personal thoughts and feelings and sort of maybe, in meditation coming up against things that are hard, right? You need to provide people with the necessary time and space and support. So, we have one-on-one meetings with our trainees, just check in with them, to make sure that, that they feel supported, that they feel cared for and looked after. And that way as well, I think that you avoid, any sort of issues that might occur between sort of different members of the training.
mhm. Yeah, I think you answered it beautifully, and it's something I'm trying to get better at. I have hard time maybe becoming more like disciplinary teacher. I'm more like, okay, like let's hear what it's I want everybody to feel safe and welcome and also but at the same time, like you need to have both. You also have to be strong and have that boundary, like you said. So I think that's like a beautiful thing to navigate and try to find the balance that works. Is there anything with your teacher training that I'm sure you've been doing it for so long that you have refined it and maybe you added certain aspect or you took certain aspect away? doesn't have to be a curriculum, but like you said, you have a one-on-one time with your students where you check in one with them. So those kind of things. Is there anything you learn along the way of doing this over and over again that you have refined and changed and adjusted so that it runs smoothly now? Is there anything
There
like
is no single part of the curriculum that hasn't been refined. And because, not only have we taught it a number of times, but myself and the other members of the teaching team, we all take more and more trainings. We're constantly in training because I think you should be, as a yoga professional, especially if you're really interested about, being a faithful yoga practitioner, you have to continually grow. So, as we learn more and more, as we kind of refine our own understandings of what yoga is and how it can be practiced, that all gets added into our training programs. And, I think that initially in the 200 hour, perhaps we wanted to do more. And I think that as we've kind of taught more and more of these courses, we've realized that sometimes if you really allow there to be time to explore certain areas, you don't try and force so much into, a 4 week period, but you allow people the time to really get into these different modules and ask questions and experiment and try these things. It's actually a much better experience for them. And they come away feeling much more as so they've understood, and really understood sort of what you're trying to teach them, as opposed to just trying to cram everything into the space of 4 weeks. And that's where the 300-hour course of core comes from. So you're like, okay, well, there's this other stuff that we can look at, but that's for another time. So naturally, I think as you lead a 200-hour teacher training, you're like, well, now I've got enough like additional material to do for the 300 hours on top of that as well.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And I love what you said about as teachers, we have to always continue to learn. That's something I always say on the podcast, but all the guests I interview always say. And also, like, there's so much new information coming out all the time. So,
Agreed.
teacher training 10, 15 years ago, I'm sure there's new information now about, anatomy or physiology that we have to keep updating and keep learning new things. So,
People who are studying the, ancient texts, the philosophy and so on there. I mean, academia is continually, it's a wheel that's continually turning, and there are more and more understandings about these ancient texts and how we can sort of interpret them and understand them, and more things come to light there as well.
yes, definitely. Completely agree with you. Now I want to ask a little bit about boundary. I know you mentioned that word when we're talking about teacher-student dynamic, but you work so much. You have a studio, you own, organize, run teacher training. People are traveling, staying there. You're providing the services experience for them, and you have kids. You're married, so how? And I don't know, maybe you still teach weekly classes on the schedule. So what does your weekly life look like? Like, how much are you teaching group classes versus trainings or studio owner, like back end stuff? So I'm curious about that. And also, how do you find balance? And maybe is there any boundaries you have in place to make sure you are not overworking?
Yeah, I mean, if you own your own business and you run your own projects, I mean, that is a huge danger, is to overwork and experience burnout. And I mean, no, for sure, anyone who gets into this has to do so with the knowledge that that will be something that you'll have to figure out sort of sooner or later. And so, I mean, my working week can look massively different. In December, things are pretty quiet. I can take quite a lot of time off, be with the family, but then January comes around and it's like go time. I mean, we do like almost fifth to a quarter of our revenue in 1 month in January. So, you just have to be prepared to work a lot more during that month.
Yeah.
And, so sometimes I can be working, very, very long days. Our English classes, our English teacher trainings can start at 8 in the morning, and our Spanish ones can be finishing at 9:15 at night, and quite often during a lot of the daytime, you're doing all of that. And then you've got all of your admin stuff to do sometime outside of that or around that as well. So yeah, I mean, for sure, I don't think I've had a full day off for a very long time now. But I think I'm very lucky to be supported by such a wonderful community full of people. I mean, my uh, other colleagues in my team sometimes recognize when I'm looking tired, be feeling overworked, and they help me out. They're there for me. They're really there to support and help the community because they believe in what we're doing out here as well, which is such a wonderful thing. But I mean, for sure, when I'm with my baby boy or with my wife or whatever, you have to be strict with yourself there and say, okay, phone goes off, and it's important, to have that time for social connection with your family, with your loved ones. I go out for a walk every day with my baby boy, which is really nice, and just, good time for us. So for sure, you have to be strict with yourself there as well.
And do you have employees that are full-time for your studio, or are they all part-time?
I think everybody works sort of part-time. Yeah, I mean, I'm really the only sort of full-time one, but as you probably learned, most people who teach yoga, they do so either in multiple different places, or they have other sources of revenue or income, or they, have their own sort of online studios, or sort of organize retreats and so on. So everything from social media to accountancy to the legal side of things to the teacher side, to the cleaning side, everybody sort of, collaborates to different degrees. Some people are, really working sort of 20 to 30 hours a week, even on occasions, but then there'll be other months when there's sort of less going on. So yeah, it's a little flow.
Hmm. And what is it? Okay, now I want to kind of go into what's the yoga world like in Colombia and, maybe in Medellin. Is it, are there quite a few full-time yoga teachers there that people can make their full-time income through teaching yoga in Colombia? That's my number one question. And the other one is, what are some shifts in the yoga world that you have seen and noticed in your community in Medellin, Colombia?
Yeah. So no, for sure. I mean, there are definitely people who are working full time with yoga here. I think you need to be, again, quite entrepreneurial, quite self-driven. There are people who are organizing retreats, who are doing their online classes, their private one-on-ones. They're doing some teaching in studios as well. Yeah, I think sort of through that combination, maybe they've got other things like candle making or mala making, or their own clothing brand. And so I think people who are sort of often successful in the world of being a yoga teacher are people who are able to diversify. They're very creative. They're very self-driven, and I think those are the kinds of people who find this balance of different activities and sources of income that really help them to make it, to survive sort of long term. And of course, there are plenty of other people who teach yoga as a passion project on the side. During the day they work as a graphic designer, and then they come out of work and then they teach, 3 or 4 classes a week in the evenings because that's what they really love. That's what they really enjoy. Other people are academics in universities, or goodness, I mean, psychologists. We have people from all kinds of walks of life on our teaching team here in Flying Team. Some are full-time yoga teachers, some aren't. Yeah, and I think that in terms of sort of major shifts in yoga practice, it's just, as I mentioned, how many people are interested and how many different styles of yoga you find here in the city. Everything from hot yoga and Iyengar through to yin and what is it, Kundalini yoga, yoga flow, Ashtanga. Yeah, I mean there are so many kind of like specialized communities now as well, which is really nice to see.
Mm. And what I just recently had a podcast episode where I was talking about the changes I'm seeing and noticing in my home, which is Los Angeles, California. And the trend I'm seeing, I'm curious to see if you see this or this is just like unique to LA, is that fitness is becoming very popular. So a lot of yoga studio now offer fitness classes on top of yoga, or it's like a fusion yoga lattes, yoga pilates fusion class, yoga with weights, yoga and hit or dance, or a lot of studio will have pilates classes, pilates reformers. So from what I'm noticing is that, and other people I've spoken to as well, a lot of studios that purely just offer yoga classes have hard time surviving right now. And now many yoga spaces offer very fitness oriented classes that's either fusion of yoga or fitness itself, that is part of the schedule, a part of the offering for people to sustain as a business. And I wonder if you're seeing this like rise of fitness. And yoga movement can be fitness too, but I feel like it's try not when I teach yoga, I don't think of it as I'm teaching a fitness class. I think of it as I'm teaching yoga. And yeah, so there's a rise in popularity in fitness. And I think a lot of studios feel like they have to offer those classes. It's sweaty. People want to feel sore the next day. And hot yoga is also very popular right now. So this like people really wanting to sweat and feel like they worked out is kind of the shift is going. And yoga is just kind of like part of the movement practices they want to do, but not the full practice anymore. And that's why a lot of places I see are now starting to have to implement a lot of fitness Pilates classes or weighted classes. And I don't know, do you see that happening in where you are?
Well, I think firstly, fitness culture has always been huge here in Medellin. Like, well before yoga came along, fitness has been like, I mean, you go to the Expo Fitness thing here, it is vast. I mean,
Mhm.
if not hundreds of thousands of people go through these expos, in a city of like 2.5, 3 million people. So fitness
Mm,
is massive culturally here. And I think it's kind of almost in reverse that like fitness places are starting to offer yoga now,
mm,
as opposed to kind of vice versa. But what you do see is like these very kind of trendy, like yoga brunches with ice baths, and you can get like, you could do a sweaty yoga class, and then you can get an ice bath, and then they'll have like skincare representatives, and I don't know, massages and like healthy brunch kind of included. So that kind of thing is definitely popular, and you see definitely like some of these more like trendy looking kind of hot yoga studios sort of popping up here and there around the city too. But I think that very much like if I'm seeing any kind of shift, in a way, it's almost the opposite. It's people who are coming to us from recommendations from psychologists and medical professionals. Like a lot
mm.
of people are stressed. A lot of people are overwhelmed. A lot of people are just kind of feeling a bit lost, honestly, these days. And I don't think that's something that's exclusive to Medellin. I think that is a worldwide phenomenon. A lot of people are worried, about their own lives and where the world and society is headed and whatnot. And people really, really need that space to kind of disconnect. So if I'm seeing anything, it's kind of the shift in that direction in Medellin. That there are a lot of people who we haven't seen before. People who've never done yoga. They're sort of middle aged. Uh, they've never done any kind of fitness stuff, and they need it. They need this space to decompress, to unwind, to be with their thoughts, to find a different way. Yeah, kind of dealing with their thoughts and emotions in a sort of a healthier way. So I think that, if anything, is where yoga has been headed.
That's very beautiful to hear. I like what you shared, and I feel a little bit hesitant of the changes I'm seeing here. So it's so nice to hear that is what you're seeing in your community and your world. Yeah, there's a part of me that want to kind of keep the sacredness of yoga, but at the same time, like everything is always changing, and I know I can't just hold to think how things used to be. I just have to embrace the change and go with the flow, and still at the same time, kind of like keep what I feel is true to me and kind of continue teaching that rather than trying to please everyone and teach in a way that is maybe quote unquote popular right now. So I love to hear that's the changes or the things you're seeing in your community sounds very beautiful. So thank you for sharing that. Couple more questions to kind of wrap up. What do you love the most about being a full-time teacher and business owners and studio owners? And also, what do you find most challenging?
So I think some of my favorite days are the community open days, when we just open up the doors free of charge, and we have a lot of our recently graduating or graduated teachers, sharing the classes. And it's an opportunity for me to kind of step back and just enjoy being in this space of community and watching this group of, newly empowered and passionate people sharing what they love, and seeing people from the local community just really enjoying, maybe trying something that they'd never tried before, something totally different. And it's in kind of those moments when you think, yeah, all of the stress and the heartache and, the difficulty of running a business is just worth it. So when I can see those moments, sometimes we have these, yoga with live music as well. It's just such a special atmosphere that's created. It's something really beautiful. It makes you feel that it's all worthwhile. So for sure, it's those moments. And I think that the difficulty is what a lot of people experience. It's the financial instability of it all. As a business owner, or even as a solo yoga teacher, you're constantly thinking about your sources of income. Um, that is stressful one way or another, and having, exactly as you say, you have to adapt. It's never static. You can never just a friend of mine owns a cafe and it's just like, they have the cafe and they do the same thing every day and that works for them and that's it. They don't really need to innovate that much. Whereas I think as a yoga teacher, you need to be like constantly changing and adapting and moving with what you kind of see and feel going around you. So that for sure is not easy and it's not for everyone. But yeah, if you can deal with that, if you can flow with that, then it's also can be well worth it. And receive education in exchange.
I actually always see your posting on Yoga Trip. I think it says like language, Spanish internship, some yoga studio. So
Yeah.
it always looks really fun.
Mhm.
I'm sure it'll be, I mean, a lot of people here are probably part of Yoga Trade. So if you're listening, go check out his posting on Yoga Trade. It looks really fun. Another question I have is, what does success mean to you?
That's a great question. I mean, I think success in my own personal life, I guess, means to be able to kind of apply myself to things that I find stimulating and fulfilling and enjoyable, and to be able to do that while making a living out of it, I guess. So
Hmm.
many posts from people who are sort of on Instagram and work in the corporate world, and they're just so kind of exhausted by, you know, grind and what they have to do day to day. And it makes me feel very grateful, I guess, to be able to work in something that I feel so passionately about. For sure.
And how do you find a balance of like being a business owner, studio owner, teacher, and teacher trainer? Like you're building programs, you're, you know, constantly running things and creating things, and at what point can you do you want more or keep going more? And then at what point it's like, okay, this is enough. I don't need to grow more than this. Like that balance, I find it, I'm personally having challenge right now of like, I can keep working, working, working. And then like, I feel like I'm chasing these like external validation or my own validation, like what's a full-time yoga teacher can achieve, but then also like at what cost? Like if I'm stressed all the time, if I'm overworking, is it even worth it? So like this balance of like knowing the contentment, santosha, but then also like having the drive. So how do you balance the two as a business owner?
Yeah, I mean, I constantly have um, colleagues who are sort of planting seeds in my mind. I mean, I like to really talk with my teaching staff and really regularly meet with them and listen to their ideas and so on. And so, they are often the ones who say, Andrew, have you not considered like doing this in
Mhm.
Spanish as well as in English? Think about it. And it might be, kind of 6 months later when I'm like, okay, yeah, that really does kind of make sense. And I mean, it is for sure a challenge, and I'm just, as I say, been in this process of making a 300-hour training and now we're translating it into Spanish. And that's a massive undertaking. I mean, just hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of hours of work, to get all of that sort of done. So, yeah, I guess it's something each person is going to have to answer for themselves. But, what can I say? You go through periods when you have to work a lot and just kind of really apply yourself to get these projects done, and other periods when you can kind of step back and enjoy things and take a little bit more of a rest and a bit more of a sort of, step back and take a bit of an easier role. But I guess as well, as you develop a community, as you develop a business, you're always finding more efficient ways to do things as well. Your team grows, you find a way to be able to delegate some of the things that maybe you don't need to be spending your time doing. And it kind of frees you up as well to kind of do the creative thinking, the sort of, okay, where do I want to, what's my vision? Where do I want to go next with my project? And so, yeah, that's definitely helpful.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. That there's a seasons of life and seasons of business where you're busy and also you get to slow down, but also what you said of delegating so that you can do that creative work. Because definitely. When I'm so busy teaching, I just don't have time to sit and even like think and be with my own thoughts because I'm just so busy teaching and running around from places to teach. So definitely do think there's so much value and importance to having some downtime so that, this creativity can start to flow or ideas start coming up. When you're too busy, stressed, exhausted, you just don't have
Exactly.
time for that. Yeah.
No, and that's where I want to take things over the next few years. I think as you sort of develop these courses, these training programs, they're done. I mean, you can for sure tweak them and modify them and adapt them and whatever. But I mean, for sure, my sort of aim over the next few years as we go forward is to give myself more time to be creative, to think creatively, to think about how I want to do things differently, and how to, continue to sort of adapt to the ever changing and shifting sand, the yoga world.
Yeah. Thank you. That kind of answered my last question for you. My last question was like, where do you see yourself and the business and the yoga like moving towards? Is there any specific direction you're trying to take your business or teaching to? Kind of like what do you see in the future?
I mean, I have so many different plans and initiatives that I'd love to get involved in. I'd love to maybe do a little bit more stuff online, especially for other communities around Colombia that don't really have access to yoga training right now. And I get written by so many people who, live in Bucaramanga or, or goodness knows where, sort of who really don't have much in the way of a local yoga community, but who are really, really interested in developing their practice and want to take a teacher training. So I'd really love to maybe have like a really high quality online offering in Spanish for some of those communities as well. So anyway, we'll figure that out in due course because that's going to be a whole other thing is to record 200 hours worth of material. But there we go. Definitely something that's on my mind.
Uh-huh. I love that. Thank you for sharing all of that. This conversation has been so fascinating, fun for me to talk to teachers and business owner of yoga from another part of the world because I feel like there's some, you probably could hear in a lot of my question. I'm just like so curious how it's different from here and all the amazing experience you have and the stories you shared is, I think, so fascinating and interesting. And I'm so happy to hear that you are doing what you love, teaching yoga in the community in Medellín. So is there anything else you want to tell the listener, any question I missed or I didn't ask you? But also if there's anything you want to share to listeners about what's coming up, how they can find you, how they can get involved if they're interested in any of your programs.
For sure. So, I mean, especially if, you want to learn how to teach yoga in Spanish as a qualified yoga teacher, I'd love to, help you on that journey as well. And we have a really nice 2-week long course that can be done either online or in person here in Medellin. So that's one option. If you are somebody who would really love to spend some time refining your art as a yoga teacher, our internships program, we've been supporting yoga teachers for about sort of 7 years through that program now. So we'd love to have you come and join. We've got some super, super experienced teachers here who can help, you with their insights and support you along the way. And then, of course, if you want to develop your teaching abilities, either by taking a 200 or a 300-hour advanced course, we have options available as well. So yeah, look on the Flying Tree Yoga website or on the Yoga Internships website. On both, you'll find information about all of the stuff that we do.
And I'll make sure to link all of that on the show notes. Andrew, thank you so much for your time today to share and chat with me. And I hope you have a great day. And hopefully someday when I get to go back to Colombia, I'll come visit your studio.
Please, we'll be here.
Yes. Have a good day. Thank you so much.
The same to you.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation I had with Andrew. I actually had a great time talking to him and asking him all the questions about what it's like to teach yoga in Colombia, what it's like to be a studio owner, what it's like to be a teacher trainer in English and Spanish and teach people from English-speaking countries and also teaching local communities in Medellín, Colombia, and how it might be different or how similar it might be. So if anyone's interested in teaching yoga in Spanish, because sometimes I hear people wanting to learn how to teach yoga in Spanish. So if that's something that you're interested in, I feel like Andrew's program would be perfect. Or if you just are looking to go to Medellin, spend time in Colombia and do some language internship while you teach yoga, I'm sure his program is really amazing. That is it from me this week. Just a reminder that Trauma Informed workshop is happening this upcoming Saturday from 2 to 3:30 p.m. Pacific time, April 9th. And I have one more room left for my upcoming ethical yoga retreat in Nicaragua. If you're interested, please let me know. If you enjoy this podcast, I would highly appreciate it if you could start it, subscribe it, download it, leave a review, whatever you can do on whatever platform you're listening to. But most importantly, I would love it if you could share this podcast or any episode that you really liked with any of your friends, family, coworkers, your yoga teachers, so that people can also enjoy and benefit from listening to this podcast. So I really appreciate all of you for listening this week, and I will speak to you next week. Bye.